We're live. It is Sunday, August 16th, 2020, 5:01 p.m. We're late today for no good reason. We were shooting the shit. We were having fun we weren't having fun. We were having something in lieu of fun. In lieu of the normal monologue today, I have an important correction from yesterday. One of the things about doing this stuff live, people ask you questions. In this case, Mike Fromberger, I think, asked a question. I gave some extemporaneous thoughts on DHS and what we might do with it and how we might fix it. Or maybe it was Tony Cava, I'm not sure. And I mentioned that there had been two highly excellent heads of DHS, Michael Chertoff and Janet Napolitano. And I forgot a third, which is ironic because the third is a good friend of mine, Jay Johnson. Jay was actually an extremely fine head of DHS, and I know exactly why I forgot him, which is that the context in which I got to know Jay and which I still think about him was when he was general counsel of the Defense Department, which was in the early several years, the first half of the Obama administration. And Jay was there when we started Lawfare and was actually part of the target audience for Lawfare when we first started it. And so I always think of Jay as a DOD lawyer rather than as what he's primarily known as these days, which is a very distinguished former head of DOD. And so the point actually makes my point even stronger that I was making yesterday, which is that if you have a sequence of very fine leaders across party, and Mike Chertoff is an exceedingly smart and competent guy, followed by Janet Napolitano, who is one of the most diversely accomplished politicians in the country, from running a major university system to being a governor of a significant state to running DHS. That's a pretty amazing range of experience. And yes, Andrew McMahon Chertoff was the head of the criminal division at the Justice Department. He was a federal appellate court judge for a while. He's a very talented, serious guy and a very smart guy. And then you have somebody like Jay Johnson. So you have a sequence of good leadership, and the result is not that you can consolidate the organization as an organization. It's still kind of diffuse and less than wholly under control. That suggests that there is something systemically wrong. Anyway, to the person who brought this to my attention yesterday and wrote to me and Kate immediately after the show to ask whether I had intentionally left Jay Johnson out, who was, by the way, not Jay Johnson. I just want to make clear. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And to everybody else, and particularly Jay Johnson, sorry for the error. It was certainly not intentional. We are not allowed to have fun anymore. But in lieu of fun, we have a mystery guest. Kate, tell us who our mystery guest is so I can bring him or her in.
Our mystery guest is Carrie Goldberg.
Oh, what fun. There is Carrie Goldberg. And let's bring her in.
Last time we saw Carrie, I do believe that she was...
there were some martial arts involved.
Yeah. We were taking a live martial arts class from Yorick, and she was on her roof doing like really awesome kicks, and that's the last time I saw Carrie. So thought we would check
All right,
in.
well, Carrie has been invited in. We have to bring Yorick back.
Yeah, we should bring Yorick back.
We can make all sorts of alas, poor jokes.
I know.
We can say, I knew him, Kate. A fellow of infinite wit, of most excellent fancy. Hello, Carrie Goldberg.
Hi.
A woman of infinite wit and most excellent fancy.
Hi.
Yes, you.
How are you guys?
It's really great to see you.
It's nice to see you.
Are you in Brooklyn?
I am.
Awesome.
So you'll be pleased to know, Carrie, I was asked to speak to a very distinguished group, which included some federal appellate court judges and some others, about Section 230. And I talked at length about what I described as the most extravagant interpretation of 230, which was the Second Circuit's opinion in your Grinder case. And if I do say so myself, I got a fair bit of mileage out of it. People were shocked.
Yeah, I don't think people appreciate it as much as they do. Well, I appreciate it a lot, but that's great. Sorry, what were you going to say, Carrie?
No, I was going to say I'm flattered, and I stand by my belief that extravagant is the best adjective to use.
I mean, look, I mean, it serves my argumentative interests a great deal because I group it with, I always use three examples of the excesses of Section 230. One is the fact that Omegle says, predators have been known to use Omegle, use at your own peril. They're solely responsible for their own conduct, and they're, of course, correct under the law. The second is that Twitter, to this day, gives a thing of value, a Twitter account, to the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, in apparent violation of federal criminal law, and fears no civil liability as a consequence of doing so. And the third is that you once called up Grindr's general counsel and says your service is being used to send hundreds of men demanding sex to my client and harassing him. And they said to you, tough shit. We don't have to do anything about it. 230 says we don't have a problem. And I think that when you put those three things together, it's a pretty powerful combination arguing that there's something extravagant going on in the degree of protection that this is offering platforms.
I agree. Usually we think of extravagance as being like fur coats and dripping diamonds, but I think at 230 is even more repulsive.
Really loved Carrie so for those that don't know Carrie is a victims' rights lawyer. She specializes in suing. What is your tagline? Pervs, trolls,
psychos, assholes, pervs, and trolls.
Yes,
although
I have it on a pencil somewhere. It's quite
psychos
good.
Is not politically correct.
Oh, yeah.
Which one?
Psychos.
I mean, psychos.
Right. So I'm adjusting.
Yes, and you. Well, I guess that's true. But I was just going to say that you've had a number of very high-profile cases. One of your clients is Katie Hill, though you've had a number of others. And the case that Ben is talking about was a big case in the Second Circuit that went up to the Second Circuit. That Carrie represented someone who was horribly harassed by by an ex-boyfriend on Tinder, using the app to send thousands of men to his home to try to rape or abuse him. And when alerted, Tinder did nothing, or Grindr did nothing, and Carrie brought suit, but it was dismissed because of Section 230 protection. And but with one of the arguments that you make, and I love it, and which Ben is kind of referencing, is that there is this really there's this really nice job that you do of kind of arguing. I think it's quite ingenious, of arguing that this is a service or like kind of product And so it is therefore not actually kind of in the purview of Section 230 immunity, and it is not like a platform for speech, as it were. And, you know, Section 230 is very robust, and so it didn't the Second Circuit didn't agree with you. But it's a great argument. It's on the record. It's gotten a lot of play. So yeah, I think it's great. Also, when you were on the I did that 230 panel. It feels like a million years ago in like late June. You brought up a really important point, which was just basically like, it's still hard to bring a tort action. Like, it's still hard to bring a cause of action. Like, it's not as if like just letting us bring the action is like such an easy, such a gimme. And I thought that was like a great point. And David French liked that too.
Before we get too far into the any 230 discussion, we're getting requests for a basic 230 explanation. So let's just say Section 230 is a provision of federal law that says that for any interactive computer service, and that term is defined very broadly, to include basically anything you would think of as a platform. The platform is immune from liability for any conduct by its third-party users. So it's potentially liable for its own, if Twitter posts a libelous thing about me on the Twitter account on Twitter, or sends out a user notification that says, Ben Wittes eats children, I might be able to sue them for libel. But if Carrie posts about me that I eat children, Twitter has no liability for that.
Yeah. Unlike kind of like you traditionally think like people sue the New York Times, for example. Like that's like the classic example is like a publisher of something can get sued because they have deeper pockets, because they distributed it because of all of these various things. And so this is like an exception to that.
Yeah. And I think like the example you just gave, Ben, is exactly what it was intended for when it
That's what it was intended for.
Right.
In 95, 96. It was basically when the internet looked nothing like it does now. And companies, there was a multi-$100 million judgment against Prodigy for a defamation matter. And our lawmakers were like, oh my God, this adorable little internet, it's going to just die. And if these tiny little companies are held liable for everything that users post, and it's not, we can't expect them to be screening all the messages. And if they are going to be held liable, then they're going to over censor, and there goes this beautiful democracy of democratic ideas. And so, yeah, I mean, it was crazy.
There was too much porn. And Congress wanted to incentivize getting it taken.
Senator Exxon.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember Senator Exxon. He had his big binder full of porn that he used to bring down to the Senate floor. And one thinks he may have enjoyed that role a little too much.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, he was a senator who discovered that there was porn on the internet. Yeah. So, Carrie, tell us enough about 230 for now. We'll get back to it if people want to talk more about 230. But you have one of the 5 most unusual law firms in the world. Tell us about it. It's a law firm devoted to suing the worst, nastiest assholes in the world.
Well put. Yeah, my law firm, we represent victims of mostly sexual privacy violations and sexual violence. And we do sometimes, sue complete pieces of garbage. But oftentimes, that's not the right direction, because it turns out that the most garbage people aren't hugely don't have a lot of liquidity to go after, and so often it's keeping our.
They have cash flow issues.
Yeah, it's getting orders of protection, sometimes escalating things with the police, or the serious cases with the FBI and DOJ if it's a major stalking case. Our clients are victims of revenge porn, sextortion. We represent a lot of underage people who've been victims. We sue schools. Tech companies is really like my most fun defendant, because of Section 230. It's so challenging to find ways to hold them liable, because especially in my stalking cases or my underage cases, like I very rarely see a situation where technology is not somehow being abused or used as a weapon against my clients. And usually the tech company has just ignored whatever pleas our clients have made, and so I really hold them kind of vicariously liable in my own brain for whatever hell my client's going through. And I've got a couple cases that I'm building right now. I'm frustrated because I don't have like a live case against a tech company right now where I can challenge 230, but I've got a couple brewing. But I feel like that's one of the things that COVID has fucked up, is that there's just been so much attention to just like stabilize things and make my law firm go remote and make sure my staff is safe and that like we haven't gotten a chance to like build the ambitious, awesome cases that like are ready to go.
Also, your office is just actually awesome. There is a velvet punching bag in the office. It is so cool. I was like very disappointed to hear it was not often used, but it's like a work of art.
It's used. Everyone, one year for the holidays, I gave everyone branded punching boxing gloves. So
that's pretty great.
They can use it.
Cool. So I want to ask you a sextortion question, because when I started working on, so this is now 3.5 years ago, I did a study for Brookings on sextortion cases. And almost everybody that I said the word sextortion to, including people like Danielle Citron and Marianne Franks and people who like do this stuff for a living, had basically not, sextortion was not on their radar screens. They were very focused on revenge porn cases, but sextortion had really slipped under the radar. And the person who I called and asked to review the study that we did, who was like, oh yeah, no, this is a huge problem, the only person who was not a prosecutor or an FBI agent was you. And you were like, yeah, I see a lot of these cases. And you sort of shared my sense that this was a lot of the worst cases were in this domain. And so my question is, when did you start seeing these cases, and why do you think they slipped under the radar for so many people, including, the Kamala Harrises of the world, who were very, quick off the bat on the revenge porn stuff? Why did the sextortion cases, to this day, are much less high profile? They just attract less attention.
I think there are two reasons.
Can you define the difference between that, just for everyone? We're getting some questions, just like between sextortion and revenge porn or non-consensual porn.
I can do that. So, revenge porn is the non-consensual distribution of intimate images. Usually there's a publication component to it. Whereas sextortion is using like coercion to or threats or blackmail to demand that somebody participate in in a sex act, and sometimes that sex act is filming themselves or taking pictures and sending it to the offender. And I think there are two reasons why the sextortion hasn't, even though it's arguably a much more like the victimhood of sextortion is in some ways much more desperate than even non-consensual porn, is that you've got victims who generally are younger, underage, and then you don't have usually you don't have the publication component, and so it's easy to see that non-consensual porn is an issue because you can go on Pornhub and there's sections of it, or used to be, it's like sleeping pictures of my ex-girlfriend, or like we can see the publication right before our eyes, whereas the sextortion, it's those are really patient crimes. I can give people an example of one.
So give people an example, because I think I think most people do not understand how horrible these cases are.
They're horrible. They're horrible. So if you don't want to have I don't mean to disrupt your Sunday right now, but it's gonna get dark and
we're comfortable with disruption. I mean, sometimes we don't always have fun in lieu of fun. Sometimes we talk about serious stuff.
Usually in sextortion, there's a slow building of trust between two strangers online. And so, taking, for example, a client I have who's 11, she was she met somebody on Instagram, and they were chatting about anime, and she liked some of his anime drawings, and very quickly it became, this is just direct messaging, this friendship about anime. And then over the next few days, this was during COVID, she wasn't being supervised online because her mom's at home health aide and had to leave, and so before long, the who she thought was a guy that was about her age started pressuring her for naked pictures, and she said no, and then he just amped up the demand, and then she started taking them, and then he could use that material and the threat of distributing it to demand more, which he did do, and made her take videos, and they're very disturbing videos, and then he started threatening to send them to her 13-year-old sister, and so there's a huge component of shame in these cases. I mean, it's so predatory because the ideal victim is somebody who's young, who's maybe like a little having a difficult time, maybe, and
lonely,
and they can really use this shame. They're afraid to tell their parents because they're ashamed. They're afraid that they're going to get in a lot of trouble, the victim, and so it continues for a very long time. And I've had some cases where it's continued for a couple of years, and it's like these kids are like sex slaves, because they keep producing the content for fear that it's going to be distributed to everybody, and oftentimes the abusers telling them that you're breaking the law, and so if anyone finds out about this, you're going to get arrested. I mean, it's just like it's awful.
And so it probably goes on all the time. People are just terrified, and one of the reasons is because it isn't publicly, it isn't published, as you said. People, there's a reason we haven't heard about it. Mm-hmm. It's because it's used in kind of in the shadows of
yeah, and there's kind of two different kinds of offenders. There's the kind that is really prolific and has we recently got somebody arrested who had like over 30 file folders of different people that he victimized, file folders on his computer. Whereas there are also some like rings where they
to like create content.
Yeah, it's more like child pornography rings, where there's sharing of it. So not all of them like share it.
So a couple of additional sextortion notes just to make what Carrie said worse. One of the novelties of the internet has been allowing people to scale this. So the most prolific sextortionists have hundreds or thousands of victims. And they're basically doing, the first, creating the infrastructure to do the first Uber ride takes a huge amount of investment. The 100,000th Uber ride takes zero investment, right? And it's exactly the same with sextortion. The study that we did a few years ago was 78 cases and accounted for probably, it was, depending on how you counted, it was probably about 6,000 victims. And so it's a crazy ratio of number of cases to number of victims. The second thing is these are not playful sexting cases. This is not teenagers sending each other crotch shots or this is people being made to do horrific things to themselves and sometimes to siblings or sometimes to other minor children. I mean, don't think about this as like innocent stuff gone a little too far. This is really sadistic shit.
But doesn't it start out as like the minor stuff, like the small transgressions, the small selfies that like they have internal
those are
those
are the leverage
and then build
right
like that. So I just want to say that it starts with like it builds into something much more hardcore. I'm completely agreeing with you, Ben, but like at the very beginning it's like a traditional grooming thing. Go ahead, Carrie. Sorry.
I mean, like that's the thing, all kids know, okay, I'm not gonna I met somebody on Instagram, I'm not gonna go take a naked picture for that stranger. Everyone knows that. Like kids are taught that. Like that people are predators. But the thing about this is exactly what you said, is that there's a patient friendship and trust that's built. It's all about trust. And the victim at first thinks that this is a peer who's interested in them and cares about them, and in most cases has shared some secrets about themselves, and usually guilts the victim if they're like in the back of the victim's head, they're like, oh no, like I know I was taught in school like not to send naked pictures, I know that basic thing, but then they'll get guilted.
I just kind of like there are scenarios in which like I as an adult have kind of like felt that process happening and like been like, that just one person kind of like happens to accidentally like brush your leg as like in too close, slightly like weird way and not apologize for it as like they're driving the car, like little things like that. But like no one, I only have pieced that together in retrospect after some greater overture eventually happened, and I was like 28 years old or like whatever, that this was like a slow build to some type of like inappropriate thing that this person was doing, right?
Yeah.
And that's like, it's kind of one of those things that like I don't understand. Like people are saying that there needs to be more education in the classroom about this, but you're exactly right. Like there is you're exactly right that like having a normal friendship kind of looks exactly like a normal healthy friendship can look at the start of it. Like I have tons of friends from the internet that like I made friends with later. They were luckily turned out to be my age and everything else. But like like it's
Yeah.
very difficult to actually teach. Do you ever like talk about this at all in like any of the work that you do about like how to identify this? I don't know, Ben, if that was part of your study either. Um,
It was not. I mean, um, we made a decision not to approach any victims for reasons of sensitivity. They are generally have their identities protected in the court papers, and we just made a decision not to try to identify any of them. Several of them reached out to us over time, and I did reach out to one young woman who had outed herself. This is a very courageous young woman, by the way. This was a former Miss Teen USA who was
Oh yeah.
sextorted in one of the cases that we looked at. And, you know, she had something in her corner that most people don't have, which is she had an agent. So, you know, an agent is different from a parent, it's different from a teacher. It's an adult whose job it is to act in your interests, right?
Not
And who
yell at you.
represents you. So she had a few advantages, I think. One was she had the right kind of adult to turn to. But the other thing was that this was a webcam hack kind of sextortion. Somebody had hacked her webcam and gotten some pictures of her in her underwear. And, you know, she's a model. And so she's probably a little bit less afraid of pictures of her in her underwear than some other people might be. And she wasn't naked, and she didn't intentionally send anybody the pictures. So she just went to her agent, and they outed her, and she went on TV and talked about it. And I thought that was, you know, it's super super rare, and it worked really well for her, and so I thought that was, but that's a very rare case. I did reach out to her, and she never responded, and we never followed up because I don't want to harass victims. So I've made a point of sort of not. I leave it to Carrie to talk about the victim side of the equation. I have really talked about more the policy side, the inadequacies of the laws, and also just tried to identify cases. Nobody collects data on this shit. And, you know, when we released our report, the Justice Department asked us in. We had a long set of meetings with people in the Justice Department about data collection. And Loretta Lynch wrote a letter to the Hill saying, you know, they were doing what they could on the data collection side, and they were prosecuting a lot of cases. And they never, to this day, the Justice Department cannot tell you how many sextortion cases there
No.
are in the United States
And-
every year.
Yeah, I mean, there's no specific crime, federal crime. They usually do these under cyber stalking, or often there's
Or CFAA or
Right.
child pornography.
or child pornography. Yeah,
I'm like, I know that it does really noble work, but NCMEC is, I think, such a, there's only NCMEC, I feel like, sorry, and for people that don't know, that's like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It runs one of the largest databases of child pornography that does like algorithmic checking of things that are uploaded against its known universe of things, but it is fairly politicized, I would say, and like I don't know, Ben,
So-
were you gonna say something?
Well, I would say, you know, one of the interesting things about the sextortion stuff, I'd be interested whether Carrie agrees with this, is that the social media companies are really not the same in this department. Like, you know, so almost like there is a really bad, at least when I was studying this actively, there was a really bad social media actor in the that showed up in a wildly disproportionate number of these cases, and that was Kick Messenger. And Facebook, by contrast, the much reviled Facebook, shows up in almost none of them. And, you know, there's a reason for that, actually, which is one has, you know, it's pretty end-to-end protected. It's not US based. And by the way, it really has a kind of badass reputation. And the other one's trying to be respectable. And, you know, and the result is, you know, Facebook's not so good at, you know, keeping the Russians out of our election process, but I don't see them in a lot of sextortion cases.
That's
Now, I'm
changed.
curious.
That's
Has it changed, Karen?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
you know, you try to give somebody credit and they've already disappointed you.
No, you can't give them credit. Kik was involved.
Pretty bad.
In like when Brookings was doing his report, you know, people would find each other on social media and then move to Kik really fast, and that's where the exchanges would happen. And now Kik's not involved as much anymore. They're finding each other on social media. They're on mainstream social media, and it's mostly DMs on mainstream social media.
And is that because they've gone to a lot of the mainstream social media stuff has gone to sort of end-to-end encrypted stuff,
It's
so
always
that
been.
if no, Facebook Messenger is not end-to-end encrypted, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
It certainly
Yeah,
didn't
Facebook
used to be.
No, Facebook Messenger is encrypted and WhatsApp is encrypted, obviously. And then
Right.
but Facebook Messenger, unless that's changed, I remember being in all the end-to-end encryption meetings, and like iMessage, like your iMessage on your phone is encrypted.
Right.
You know, Messenger on Facebook is encrypted. Last I checked, the last thing. Anyways, I don't know how that carries over to like things like DMs on Instagram or DMs on Twitter. I don't think that. Do you know, Carrie?
Well, I do know that there's no like hashing of pictures or anything. So if a picture of child sexual exploitation material has been hashed and identified and banned on a social media platform, then like if it's being transmitted through DMs, it's not being put into that database and flagged.
You're right, Ben. I'm wrong. I'm just looking it up. I guess there is a small space of messages that are secret messages that it runs, and WhatsApp is obviously end-to-end encrypted, but it's not by default available on Messenger. You're completely right. I'm sorry. Hi. Oh, by the way, Catherine Maddox has a great question, and I told her in the chat that we'd call her in, and she said she'd come on. So sorry, but hi.
I am bringing her. I'm literally clicking invite user on screen now.
Oh, awesome. Daniel, go ahead. What's your question?
Given all the vicious stuff you've seen over the course of your career, how has it affected your views of freedom of expression and the First Amendment? Has the First Amendment been a roadblock in any of the cases you've pursued?
This is a great question. Thank you. It's been the First Amendment's been a roadblock when it's come to legislation, to getting things like non-consensual porn criminalized and stuff. That was the big hurdle, you know, to narrowly tailor a law so that it didn't offend the First Amendment. In terms of my cases, I'm not suing about speech. This isn't about speech, this is about conduct. And generally it's not protected speech that I'm dealing with. You know, with Katie Hill's case, for instance, that's going to be, that'll be a First Amendment issue.
Okay, so to separate out though and to follow up in Daniel's stead, like let's put First Amendment aside, because I agree with you. I don't think that like most of the cases that you're talking about have First Amendment implications, but like freedom of speech, were you like, where did you ever have super strong views about freedom of speech generally? Like I'm not talking about First Amendment, like the government's right, but like just general rights of like normative rights of speech. Yes, like, and like have they changed over the years?
I mean, I'm not a constitutional law enthusiast. Like, it wasn't something that was interesting to me in law school. or something that I wasn't one of those law students that is like having these midnight debates about the Constitution. It was just something
You're more of a street fighter.
yeah, it's just something I take for granted. Yes, like we have the person.
You carved your law books into shivs.
And like doing this work hasn't made me some mortal enemy of free speech, like a lot of people want to position me as. Like, no, I'm all about free speech. I just don't want, the genitals of an 11-year-old to be passed around on the internet. Like,
well
I think
said.
like most people, and like there's something wrong with our world if that offends people's idea of free speech.
Yeah, well put.
Catherine, the floor is yours.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi. How are you? I don't think of this as a free speech issue at all. I don't even know how. Hi.
That's Apollo. Sorry. Hi, Apollo.
Sorry.
I'm not a legal person, that's not my bailiwick, but I can't imagine anyone making a cogent argument that this would be a violation of free speech. It's a sex crime. Anyway, so I had
it's not that sex crimes. Sorry, there's not that sex crimes are defensible under free speech. It's that the laws or the things that are put in place to try to deal with sex crimes or like some of these things become interpreted over broadly and end up curtailing free speech in other ways. That's like kind of maybe like the tactic, just to like kind of. I don't want anyone to think that I'm like running around being like, like free speech over like 11-year-old genitals. Like I think that's
No, but
not.
but if
I thought that.
No, but look, if you floated Carrie Goldberg's name in the Electronic Frontier Foundation world, the words free speech would come up pretty quickly, because Carrie's supported, as have I, a bunch of policy proposals that they regard as threats to free speech. And, it's not that they would say that the 11-year-old's genitals are fair game or protected speech, but they would say that the rules that people like Carrie and I would argue for by way of preventing that would sweep in a bunch of other stuff that is constitutionally protected.
Yeah, and they're saying, listen, it's just, if we want a free internet, then there are just going to be, some victims. Sorry. Like, that's kind of I think their attitude about it.
I totally understand. It's kind of like, it's almost like the straitjacket of the laws that are in place have to be melded to fit newish situations, right?
Well put. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So my question, I had a whole bunch, but
you had a bunch, but you should ask all of them. They're really all very good.
Throw them out on the table, and then we'll chew over them.
Okay. So the one that obsesses me, and I think obsesses you, because I remember when you were on the show first time around, is that there's this lack of responsiveness by tech companies. So that's the thing that really like makes my blood boil. So do you find that, right, and amazing work you do. Thank God you're doing something really hard and useful. But do you find that the tech companies are beginning to respond now that you've been at this for a while, or are they just not going there?
I mean, thank you for asking this, Catherine. There was a big series of articles in the New York Times this, like December and January, about child sexual abuse material online, and how Facebook was rising to the occasion and had reported either 40 or 60 million images to NCMEC, and everyone has looked at that, or a lot of people have looked at that as like, yes, Facebook is stepping up. They're finding these images and they're reporting them. But I think we also have to think, okay, what's wrong with your product if there are 60 million images this past year that you've tagged as child sexual abuse material? Like, there's something inherently wrong with your product, and we can't really applaud them for all this great work and reporting it if they're not doing anything to stop it. And I was talking to Sarah Roberts recently, and it's just like, why, like, why is the emphasis not on, for these social media companies, why is the emphasis not on like detecting it and stopping the behavior and identifying the behavior, which, like they have the most sophisticated like behavioral analysis data possible. And why is the emphasis instead on reporting it after people have already become victims?
Mm-hmm. I think that, and Sarah's been on the show too. We should have her back on. It's been a while. She was on with Jillian York actually, of EFF, and so they were kind of an interesting pair. And they, but they, I think that's a great question. Catherine asks, and she didn't get a chance to, but it was in the chat. She asks basically if there's any type of behavior, early stage behavior of predators that you would identify early on as like types of things that like you've seen with any of your clients or like people who are victims of sextortion.
Well, when it comes to predators, there's it's always male in sextortion cases, always. Never seen a case where you've got a serious sextortion case with a female predator. And I mean, I've seen somebody got caught who's like in his early 20s, with a big cache of and comes from this like private school background. Others are, middle managers at tech companies or Best Buy, or like there's a lot of variation.
I do think that it's fascinating. I was like, you're calculating, but I was gonna say that like, I wonder if like across the board, like at some point I was in a talk with you on a panel, and you said that that like the people who did cyber stalking the most, or like that were like most aggressive, like were actually like typically police, or at some type of security or law enforcement. You said lawyers, and then you were like academics. Like you were
academics, like and entrepreneurs and
entrepreneurs,
but
and
those
musicians
and musicians. Yeah. Those are more the like the stalking, the retaliation against an ex when the relationship has gone wrong. Not necessarily the sextorters. I mean, the sextorters are a different kind of evil and sadist. This isn't somebody who is lashing out in revenge. Is somebody who is finding really weak people to dominate and to make, where that is their hobby and their pastime is to just control really weak people and extract.
They're collectors.
They're collectors, but they're
predatory collectors.
They're producers. They're producing this material.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought about it, but like with the instruction and what they like tell people to do.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you, Ben, and to Carrie, that like for kind of persisting in like creating this, this database that Ben has, and Carrie for believing Ben and being one of the only, or not believing Ben, but like being kind of.
No, Carrie didn't believe me. Carrie had her own experiences with it.
But
Carrie
like,
was
just like,
but Carrie was the person who didn't require an explanation of what was going on because she'd already seen it.
Yeah. But just this is like the fact that we need to create like a topography of kind of, unfortunately, like a hierarchy or topography of like harms, that this is like that this is like operates differently, it looks different, it comes across as different, its ramifications are different than non-consensual pornography necessarily, which or something like that. So like we have to ask other questions, Ben, but
yeah, the best way to understand this is as remote sexual assault. It's a form of sexual assault that you can do intercontinentally, and that the person doesn't even need to know who or where you are.
Yeah.
That's the best way to understand this.
Because with non-consensual pornography, the images are usually taken consensually. They're usually shared consensually with a trusted partner, and then it's the publication the distribution that's non-consensual. Here, the once the person's being blackmailed, the creation of the images themselves is non-consensual, and there's like a it's a sexual extortion. It's like it's got the little portmanteau.
Yeah.
By the way, the term sextortion, which I have never been able to figure out who coined it, appears to be a kind of prosecutor, FBI agent slang which is interesting because it's a word that, like, for a kind of crime that didn't exist before, they kind of created this term. And the one amusing thing I will say about extortion is that when I started collecting documents on it, I needed to show my mother something on my computer, and I opened a file, and this torrent of documents called Sextortion 1, Sextortion 2, Sextortion 3, which were all PDFs of court documents, but still not the kind of thing you want to jump out of your computer at your mom. All right, other questions?
So we have a question from, I'm going to read these next 3 questions because we're running out of time, but they're all excellent. One is from David Batts. Do your clients use or benefit from reputational restoration companies, or are they possibly part of the problem by demanding payment to remove adversarial information? That's the first one. Second one is, have you ever used intellectual property as a tool, relying on White versus Samsung or other precedents? And that comes from Lieu. And then the third question is, can you sue the tech companies for violating their own terms of service? Is that often successful? Matt Duration. Those are all, I think, pretty excellent questions. So go for it. Whichever you want to take first. And I can repeat them later. So
well, let's do the easiest one first, which is the IP question. We use IP law all the time to get, and it's kind of combining both questions, to get like non-consensual porn off the internet. Oftentimes our clients, took an image, their selfies, and so they owned the intellectual property of them. And so then we can use the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to get the materials down. Back when I first started my firm in 2014, that was like the only way to get stuff down. There weren't even policies at Facebook or Twitter or anywhere dealing with revenge porn, and you actually had to claim, ownership of the copyright. So I mean, that's the main way that we use IP law. If the offender took the image, then sometimes we actually get it transferred. Sometimes we can get an offender to do that because they feel shitty enough. Of course, if it's sextortion, we're dealing with the intellectual property of illegal content, which is another issue.
We were talking about this a few days ago over text. I think it's super fascinating. I'm kind of, you piqued my interest. It's super, I don't know the answer. Yeah,
it varies. It's I think one of the most intriguing questions is like, who owns the copyright of, if you're a victim of child sexual exploitation, the power reverts to the government, but then what are they doing to actually get the material down?
That's a super interesting question.
That generally.
Right? Isn't that fascinating, Ben?
It's a super interesting question.
She asked me this the other day, and I was like, well, fuck. I have to think about that.
Yeah, the copyrighted, I have a upsetting case of, they're all upsetting, but I have, my client's daughter was murdered, and it was a very sort of live streamed sort of situation. And then it wasn't actually live streamed, but the images, there were pictures that were
live posted.
And then, but those images went viral, but the estate doesn't own the copyright to them. So they, you're really just begging social media companies to do the right thing and get those pictures removed, which has been a very big problem for the family for the last year. What was the third question?
Yeah, no, no problem. About the reputational restoration companies,
yeah.
which I'm personally super interested. David Batts asked that question. I'm just super interested in that as well, because like Jill Filipovic has been on. I think we've talked about this before. When she was harassed, she had a pretty high profile and was able to like reverse Google bomb herself. It was before reputational like companies like worked, but she had like all of Feministing and Feminist.com like at her disposal, and she just got all of these armies of women to basically like create other ways for her name to kind of do this, and so like she stopped, like these horrible posts stopped being up so she could go on the job market. Now obviously this is something that you pay people a lot of money for, and people try to redeem you. There's like are not like Justine Sacco is like the platonic version of online shaming, but she is like one of millions now that have been online shamed or lost their job because of something they said online. So do you deal with this in any sense with like your clients? Do you suggest reputational management to them?
I deal with it with some of my clients. I mean, I think this is another situation where we have to look at big tech, because who's actually making decisions about our rankings online? It's not some like naturally occurring in nature algorithm. It's a company that has created algorithms that give more value to certain things than other things, and that, you know, wants to be in exclusive control of our online identity and drives people to sometimes the worst material about us. So I think we have to acknowledge search engines as like being, you know, a major issue here. But most of my clients can't afford reputational relief like that. And so it's really just like appealing to Google, trying to find ways that the material is violating their policies. But also, if it's in an article, if there's a shitty article in like a mainstream news piece about you, like, you're fucked. I mean, like, because it's always going to be rated high, and a lot. I think there are a lot of false promises that these reputational management companies make. You know, and a lot of it's based on these kind of what's the word? I can't think of the word, but these not, you know, like creating all this content and all the, you know, fake LinkedIn ads or LinkedIn stuff.
Coordinated and authentic behavior.
Yeah, but it's also superficial. It's kind of superficial, and then Google changes its algorithm.
But I think that's a different problem. I mean, like, if the Washington Post writes something nasty about me and it's true, well, that's kind of my problem, right? No one has done anything improper. They've maybe made a different news judgment than I would have liked them to make. But, that's called a free press. If somebody posts non-consensual images of you that they have no business either having or disseminating, that strikes me as a completely different problem. It's not a function, it raises the question of their right to do that, of invasion of privacy. It's a much more kind of Brandeisian kind of situation than a newspaper reporting about something that I would prefer to keep private.
Yeah, but then you've got a lot of things in between. Like, revenge porn's pretty easy to get removed from your, at this point, thankfully.
It is now, yeah.
Now. For some people, whose images were circulating for 10 years, it's always going to be a game of catch up. But what about like my friend's brother-in-law? He was arrested when he was like 18. He had a psychotic break, and he was arrested, and it was like front page of the local newspaper. He's now 26. He's got a very unique name, and he still lives in that community, and he's job hunting.
My life is terrible.
He's really stable, like he he was his dad had died, and he was back when this had happened, and he had a psychotic break and broke the law. And he was like, what should I do? I was like, you know what? Sometimes all you need to do is just write like a pleading heart letter. We wrote a letter to that small town newspaper and just said, hey, this is what's going on. This is the impact that this article is having. We're not asking you to remove this from the universe, but we need it. Like, we need his name unlinked from it. And they did it. And
yeah. Well,
See,
that's
this
called
is a
just
huge
people
right.
being decent.
yeah,
There's like all of these. I had a really fascinating. It's funny that you bring that up because I was in this Right to Be Forgotten panel, before probably like 9 months ago, and one of the things was like people from it was like the lawyer from the New York Times, and then like a lawyer from like a small town newspaper, and he was like, if people write to us and request that we unlink to them or take their name out of something, we'll do it. We're not a paper of record. We don't need to have there's no reason that that we have to ruin people's lives by having their names in these things. And it was a much harder question for a paper record, whatever the hell that means. Like the Times, which I think is like an asinine distinction. I mean, and I'm also anti Right to Be Forgotten, to be clear, but I do think that there is there needs to be something that starts to happen, and I understand the harm that's kind of created by this. I am sympathetic to that. This is it's over and over again. I just don't know that it's about deleting stuff.
Yeah. Can I just acknowledge that a lot of people in the comments are really disturbed by by what we're talking about, and it's very dark for them. And I want to just say that I'm sorry that you're having that experience. There are a lot of people that are living this day in and day out who are victims, and I hope that your heart goes out to those people who are inside in the guts of these crises every day. And one thing we can do with our discomfort about these topics is channel it to feel really empathetic toward the victims.
Yeah.
And I think
I really agree with that, and I think the the fact that we find this really, I mean, it's a vile subject, and the fact that we all it's pretty invisible to a lot of us, but it doesn't mean it's affecting less people less severely. And I understand how pervasive it is. It's much more common, and it's much more close to your home than you think. That's, no matter who you are. We need to wrap up. For everybody who wants a relief from this, please check out in my Twitter feed the video of the wolf puppy with the hiccups.
I was wondering if wait, you have to also mention the poll.
The poll is up, and but I think if you haven't seen the video of the wolf pup with hiccups, you might want to check that out because it might change your vote. Carrie,
this is so cute.
You're a great American. Thanks for all you do, and what a surprise, and what a cheerful surprise.
What'd you say?
Yeah, but you don't believe in borders, Kate.
I don't believe in borders. I said, you said you're a great American.
You should all know I have,
even if you were Canadian.
I have invited John Lovett on the show to debate time reform, to see if he will defend his boring proposal to make daylight savings permanent. We have no idea who's going to be on the show tomorrow, but we will post it when we know. And until then, Kate, you get the sign off today.
Oh, yeah.
What do we say?
Thank you so much.
Wow.
Thank you.
See if you can make a joke out of this one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. In lieu of fun. Oh wait, that was been a long time since they fucked it up. Oh, we don't have fun anymore. So in lieu of fun, we have cute
This?
animal videos.
That was cheap.
Yeah, I know. It was really cheap. Well, Carrie.
Great to see you, Carrie.
Bye. Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone. Thank you, everyone watching.